A rusty pickup truck sat stranded by the side of the road, its hood propped open like a weary traveler pausing for breath. The woman standing beside it looked just as frustrated as the old machine itself, brushing wind-blown strands of hair. From her face as she waved for help, Graham Beckett, a struggling single father, wasn't in the habit of stopping for roadside strangers. But something about the scene tugged at him, the weariness in her stance, the quiet determination in her eyes. Against his better judgment, he pulled over. Fixing the truck was easy. Understanding the woman's secrets would prove much harder, because she wasn't just another traveler passing through. She carried with her the weight of a crumbling legacy, a vast farm on the brink of ruin, a name tied to history, and a past she had long tried to escape. What started as a simple act of kindness would soon unravel into something far greater. Graham had restarted her truck, but would he help her restart a life she wasn't sure she wanted? Sometimes fate works in mysterious ways. Sometimes the past finds you when you least expect it. And sometimes the love you never saw coming is the one that changes everything. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Every subscription helps bring more heartwarming, inspiring stories like this one to life. If you love tales of resilience, unexpected love, and the magic of second chances, you won't want to miss this. Now let's step into the world of Whitmore Farm and discover the journey of Izzy and Graham. The sun hung low over the Texas horizon, casting long shadows over the cracked asphalt road stretching through miles of golden farmland. Graham Beckett, his hands rough from years of labor, tightened his grip on the steering wheel of his old Ford F-150. Another long day at the repair shop had left him exhausted, but he was used to the grind. Life as a single father didn't allow much room for anything else. Beside him, his 8-year-old daughter Maeve hummed softly, her fingers tracing patterns on the dusty window. She had inherited her mother's auburn hair and big brown eyes, but her stubborn determination, that was all Graham. "Dad, why are we stopping?" Maeve's voice pulled him from his thoughts as he slowed down the truck. Up ahead, on the side of the road, a rusty old pickup sat at an awkward angle, its hood propped open. A woman stood beside it, waving one hand while brushing stray strands of golden blonde hair from her face with the other. Graham exhaled sharply. He didn't usually stop for stranded drivers, not because he didn't want to help, but because time was a luxury he didn't have. But something about the scene tugged at him. The way the woman's shoulders slumped slightly, the frustration in her expression, the old truck itself, its faded teal paint a relic from another era. "Dad, we have to help," Maeve insisted, already unbuckling her seatbelt. Graham sighed. "All right, kiddo, stay in the truck." He pulled over, stepping out onto the warm asphalt. The woman turned, relief flashing across her face. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe mid-30s, dressed in worn jeans and a white linen shirt. "Need a hand?" Graham asked, already eyeing the engine. "That would be an understatement," she admitted, exhaling sharply. "I think the alternator's shot, but I'm not exactly a mechanic." Graham chuckled despite himself. "Lucky for you I am." She smiled, and for a moment the exhaustion in her deep blue eyes lifted. "I appreciate it. I'm Izzy, by the way." "Graham?" he replied, already rolling up his sleeves. The engine bay was a mess of rust and tangled wires. He worked in silence, methodical and efficient, while Izzy stood nearby, watching with interest. "So, do you do this often?" she asked after a while. "What, rescue strangers on the side of the road?" Graham smirked. "Not usually, but my daughter insisted." Izzy leaned slightly to glance into the truck, where Maeve waved enthusiastically. "She's adorable," Izzy said warmly. "Yeah," Graham said, glancing over his shoulder at his daughter. "She's the best thing I've ever done." A comfortable silence settled between them as he worked. Izzy shifted her weight, then sighed. "I swear, this truck has a personality of its own. One minute it's fine, the next it's deciding I need an unscheduled roadside break. Graham glanced up. Why not get something newer? She hesitated. It belonged to my grandfather. He always said a truck like this wasn't just a machine, it had a soul. I guess I can't bring myself to let it go. There was something in her voice, something wistful, almost sad. Graham didn't press. Everyone had their own ghosts. After a few more minutes, he wiped his hands on a rag. It's a quick fix for now, but you'll need a new alternator soon. Izzy sighed in relief. Thank you, really? She patted the truck's hood. Looks like you've got the magic touch. Graham smirked. More like years of grease and busted knuckles. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small wad of cash. Here. He shook his head. Not necessary. Izzy frowned. Come on, you just saved me from being stranded in the middle of nowhere. You're not in the middle of nowhere, Graham pointed out. Town's about 10 miles back. Okay, well, I was emotionally stranded, she countered, tilting her head playfully. Graham almost smiled, but caught himself. Call it a favor, just pay it forward. For a second, Izzy studied him, something unreadable in her expression. Then she tucked the money back into her pocket. All right, Graham, I'll pay it forward. Maeve suddenly leaned out of the truck window. Are you staying in town, Miss Izzy? Izzy turned to her. For now, I just moved into a little rental on the edge of town. Maeve beamed. Then you should come to my dad's garage. He fixes cars, but mostly old ones, and he makes the best sandwiches. Graham shook his head. Maeve, I might just take you up on that, Izzy said, grinning. She climbed into her truck, turned the key, and the engine rumbled to life. Graham took a step back, watching as she pulled onto the road. As the dust settled, Maeve turned to her father. She's nice, she said matter-of-factly. Graham sighed. Don't get any ideas, kiddo. But something about Izzy lingered in his mind longer than it should have, and as the old truck disappeared into the horizon, he had a feeling their paths would cross again. The scent of fresh coffee and warm cinnamon filled the air as Izzy Whitmore pushed open the wooden door of Carly's diner, the small-town cafe she had stumbled upon the day before. The place had an old-fashioned charm. Checkered floors, red, vinyl booths, and a waitress who called everyone on. It was the kind of place that reminded her of childhood road trips with her grandfather, stopping in towns like this, where life moved at a slower, more deliberate pace. She liked that. Sliding onto a bar stool at the counter, she glanced at the menu, though she already knew she'd order coffee, strong and black. A warm, friendly voice broke her thoughts. Morning, sugar. Haven't seen you around before? Izzy looked up to see Carly Monroe, the diner's owner, setting down a steaming cup of coffee in front of her. She was a sturdy woman in her 60s, with short silver hair and a knowing smile, the kind of person who had probably seen it all in this town. Just moved in, Izzy replied, wrapping her hands around the cup. Izzy Whitmore. Carly raised a brow, recognition flickering across her face. Whitmore, huh? Any relation to Jasper Whitmore? Izzy hesitated for a split second before nodding. He's my grandfather. Carly's smile softened. Well, I'll be. I remember Jasper from back in the day. Hell of a man. That farm of his used to be the pride of this county. She paused. What brings you back? Not many folks return once they leave. Izzy forced a smile. Just needed a change of scenery. Carly didn't press, but the knowing look in her eyes suggested she wasn't fooled. That was the thing about small towns. Secrets didn't stay secret for long. As Izzy took a sip of her coffee, the bell over the door jingled, and in walked none other than Graham Beckett, with his daughter Maeve skipping alongside him. Izzy hadn't expected to see him so soon, but when Maeve spotted her, the little girl beamed and waved enthusiastically. Miss Izzy! Graham, looking like he had very much hoped to avoid this encounter, exhaled sharply before giving her a nod. Morning! Morning! Izzy replied, fighting back a smile at how uncomfortable he seemed. Maeve hopped onto the stool beside her, all enthusiasm. "Are you staying in town for good? Daddy says people usually leave." "Maeve," Graham muttered. Izzy chuckled. "Well, I'm staying for now." She glanced at Graham. "And it looks like I'll be taking your daughter's recommendation. I might need a mechanic soon." Carly, having been listening with amusement, chimed in. "You won't find a better one than Graham. He can fix just about anything." "That's what I've heard." Izzy tilted her head. "I might swing by your shop later." Graham let out a non-committal grunt before focusing on ordering breakfast. But Maeve, undeterred, leaned in closer. "Did you know my dad makes the best sandwiches?" Izzy grinned. "You know, I think you mentioned that." Carly laughed. "Maeve here's Graham's best marketing tool. If he'd let her, she'd have half the town eating at his garage instead of my diner." "Not a bad idea," Izzy mused. "A mechanic shop with a built-in sandwich counter. You'd be the first in town." "Absolutely not," Graham muttered, shaking his head. Maeve sighed dramatically. "Daddy has no vision." Izzy laughed, enjoying this more than she probably should have. There was something refreshing about Graham's blunt nature. It was a sharp contrast to the world she had grown up in, where every conversation was a performance, every interaction a strategic move. He was real, and she wasn't sure if that was comforting or dangerous. Izzy arrived at Beckett's Auto Repair just after lunch. The shop was nothing fancy, just a large garage with a sign that had seen better days, but it had a charm to it. It was the kind of place built on hard work and trust, not flashy advertising. She found Graham under the hood of an old Chevy, his hands already covered in grease. When he noticed her standing there, he straightened and wiped his hands on a rag. "You actually came," he said, mildly surprised. "I said I would," Izzy replied. He studied her for a moment before gesturing toward the side of the garage. "Your truck still running?" "For now," she admitted. "But I figured I'd have you look it over before it decides to quit on me at the worst possible moment." Graham nodded, leading her to where her rusty pickup was parked. As he popped the hood, Izzy leaned against the fender, watching him work. "You know," she mused, "most mechanics would have taken the cash I offered yesterday." Graham didn't look up. "I don't take money for 5-minute fixes." "That's some kind of personal rule?" "Something like that." Izzy studied him, intrigued. "You don't talk much, do you?" Graham sighed. "Is there a point to this conversation, or are you just here to distract me while I work?" Izzy smirked. "A little of both." A ghost of a smile flickered across his face, but it was gone before she could be sure she'd actually seen it. After a few minutes, Graham stepped back. "Your truck's holding on for now, but it's not going to last forever. You should think about replacing it." Izzy ran a hand along the faded paint. "I know, but I can't just get rid of it." Graham glanced at her, something unreadable in his gaze. "Sentimental attachment?" "Something like that," she echoed his earlier words. For a moment, they stood in silence, the only sound the distant hum of a radio playing from inside the garage. Then Izzy straightened. "Well, thanks for the checkup. I guess I'll be seeing you around, Beckett." "Looks like it," he said. As she walked away, Graham found himself watching her go, a frown tugging at the corners of his lips. Izzy Whitmore was a mystery, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to solve it or keep his distance, but something told him he wouldn't have much of a choice. The afternoon sun cast a golden hue over the town as Izzy drove her rusty pickup down the winding country road leading to Whitmore Farm. The familiar scent of tilled earth and sun-baked hay seeped through her open window, carrying with it memories she hadn't invited. She hadn't set foot here in over a decade. As the house came into view, a sprawling 2-story farmhouse with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch, her hands tightened around the steering wheel. It looked smaller than she remembered, but maybe that was just time playing tricks on her. An old man sat in a rocking chair on the porch, watching as she pulled up. His piercing grey eyes, still sharp despite his age, met hers with a mixture of surprise and something else, something she couldn't quite read. "Well, I'll be damned," Jasper Whitmore muttered. Izzy stepped out of the truck, forcing a casual smile. "Hey, Grandpa!" Jasper didn't move for a long moment. Then with a grunt he pushed himself to his feet, his boots thudding against the wooden planks. He studied her as if trying to determine whether she was real or just a ghost from his past. "Didn't think I'd ever see you back here," he finally said, his voice rough with age and years of unspoken words. Izzy swallowed, suddenly feeling like the 16-year-old girl who had once stormed off this land, vowing never to return. "Yeah, well, life's funny that way." Jasper's gaze flicked to her truck. "Still driving that old thing, huh?" she smirked. "It's got character." He let out a short chuckle before motioning toward the house. "Well, you gonna stand out here all day, or are you coming inside?" Izzy hesitated. The last time she had been in that house, she had been screaming at her father, telling him she'd never let this place define her. But her father was gone now, and she was here. She followed. Jasper inside. The scent of aged wood and tobacco clung to the air, unchanged since she was a child. The furniture was the same, worn but sturdy, built to last like everything her grandfather believed in. Jasper shuffled toward the kitchen, pulling a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet. "You want some?" Izzy raised a brow. "It's barely past noon." Jasper poured himself a glass anyway. "You sound like your grandmother." Izzy smirked but didn't say anything. Instead, her gaze drifted to the framed photographs on the wall. Familiar faces stared back at her. Her parents, her younger self, and one of her father and Jasper standing in front of the farm, proud and unshakable. Jasper followed her gaze. "Your daddy never gave up on this place, you know." Izzy's chest tightened. "I know." He took a slow sip of his whiskey. "So what brought you back?" Izzy exhaled, leaning against the counter. "Honestly, I don't know. I was passing through, and something just pulled me here." Jasper grunted. "That's how it works. This land, it calls you home whether you like it or not." She crossed her arms. "I never wanted this life." Jasper nodded slowly. "Neither did your daddy. At first." Izzy looked at him, startled. Jasper smirked at her expression. "Thought he always wanted to be a farmer, didn't you?" He shook his head. "Nah, he had dreams of getting out too, but life has a way of showing you what really matters." Izzy swallowed the lump in her throat. She wasn't sure if she was ready to hear this. Jasper set his glass down with a thud. "Come on, let's take a walk." Jasper led her outside, toward the open fields that stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun. The wheat swayed gently, golden and alive, and in the distance, the old barn stood like a sentinel over the land. "This place is a damn mess," Jasper admitted, motioning toward the fence that was missing a few planks. "I ain't been able to keep up like I used to." Izzy frowned. "You don't have anyone helping you?" Jasper scoffed. "Most folks in this town think this farm's a lost cause, and I ain't exactly been in the best shape to prove 'em wrong." Izzy glanced at him then, really looking at him. He was still strong, but there was a weariness in his stance that hadn't been there before. Time had caught up with him. "You could sell it," she said carefully. Jasper stiffened. "That what you think I should do?" Izzy hesitated. "I don't know." Jasper turned to her, his gaze sharp. "Do you?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. Jasper sighed, rubbing a hand over his weathered face. "I had a buyer come through last month, some city boy named Holt. Says he wants to turn this place into some kind of resort. Thinks I'm too stubborn to take the money." Izzy's stomach twisted. "Daniel Holt?" Jasper shot her a look. "You know him." Izzy clenched her jaw. Of course it was Holt. He had been circling prime farmland across the state, turning old homesteads into luxury developments. She had seen his work firsthand. And if he was after Whitmore Farm... "Yeah," she said quietly. "I know him." Jasper studied her. And Izzy inhaled deeply, the weight of a decision she wasn't ready to make settling on her shoulders. "And I think you should hold off on selling," Jasper smirked. "That so?" She nodded, her gaze drifting over the land she had once wanted nothing to do with. But maybe Graham was right. Some things were worth fixing, and maybe, just maybe, she wasn't ready to let go of this place after all. The late afternoon sun hung heavy over Whitmore Farm, casting long shadows across the land as Izzy drove her rusty pickup back toward town. The engine hummed steadily beneath her, but her mind was anything but calm. The conversation with her grandfather had unsettled her. She had expected hostility, or at least a cold distance, but instead Jasper had greeted her like she had only been gone for a few months, not 12 years. And then there was Daniel Holt. The fact that he was circling her family's land made her stomach tighten with unease. She had seen what he did to places like this, turning history into profit, bulldozing legacies to make way for luxury. And yet, what claim did she have over this land anymore? She had left, after all. As she turned onto Main Street, she spotted Beckett's Auto Repair, and almost without thinking, she pulled into the gravel lot. Graham Beckett was hunched under the hood of a battered old Ford when Izzy stepped into the garage. The scent of motor oil and hot metal filled the air, mixing with the distant sound of country music playing from a radio in the corner. "Tell me you're not back already because your truck finally gave up on life," Graham muttered, not looking up. Izzy smirked. "Still running, but I figured you'd want to take another look. You seemed awfully invested in its survival yesterday." Graham straightened, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "I wouldn't say invested. More like concerned that one day I'll find you stranded in the middle of nowhere." "Touching," she mused, crossing her arms. "I had no idea you cared so much about my well-being." He shot her a flat look. "I don't. I just don't like seeing good vehicles suffer." Izzy chuckled but didn't push further. Instead, she leaned against a nearby tool bench, letting the silence settle between them. Graham finally sighed. "You look like you've got something on your mind." She hesitated, then exhaled. "I went to see my grandfather today." That made Graham pause. He tossed the rag onto the workbench and leaned against the truck, arms crossing over his chest. "And how'd that go?" Izzy shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Better than expected. He didn't throw me off the porch, so I guess that's progress." Graham smirked. "Low bar." "Very," she admitted. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The garage door was open, allowing the warm evening breeze to drift in, carrying with it the faint scent of hay from the surrounding fields. Then Izzy broke the silence. "Do you know a guy named Daniel Holt?" Graham's expression darkened slightly. "Yeah, I know him. Runs some real estate development firm out of Austin. Spends a lot of time poking around these parts, looking for land to buy up. He made an offer on my grandfather's farm." Graham frowned. "And what does Jasper think?" Izzy let out a slow breath. "He didn't say much, but I can tell he's thinking about it. The place is falling apart, Graham, and he's getting old. I don't know if he has it in him to keep fighting for it." Graham studied her for a moment before speaking. "And what do you think?" Izzy hesitated. "I think," she sighed. "I don't know. I left that place a long time ago. I never thought I'd care what happened to it." "But you do." It wasn't a question. Izzy met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "Yeah," she admitted quietly. "I do." Graham nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then maybe it's time you figure out what that means." As Izzy left the garage, she decided to walk instead of drive. The town was quiet in the early evening, the setting sun bathing the buildings in a warm glow. She passed Carly's Diner, where a handful of regulars were gathered outside, sipping iced tea and exchanging the kind of small-town gossip that never truly died. She was about to turn down the street leading to her rental house when a voice called out, "Isadora Whitmore." Izzy stiffened at the sound of her full name. She turned to see a tall, well-dressed man leaning against a sleek black BMW parked near the courthouse. Daniel Holt. Even in the fading light, he looked every bit the polished businessman she remembered. Tailored suit, expensive watch, an air of entitlement wrapped in charm. "Didn't expect to see you back in town," he said, pushing off the car and walking toward her. Izzy forced a polite smile. "Didn't expect to be back." Daniel studied her, his gaze sharp. "And yet here you are, right around the time I'm finalizing a deal on Whitmore Farm." Her stomach tightened. "Is that so?" "Your grandfather hasn't signed anything yet," Daniel admitted, tilting his head. "But it's only a matter of time. The land is too much for him to handle on his own." Izzy crossed her arms. "Maybe he doesn't have to handle it alone." Daniel's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "You planning on stepping in?" She didn't answer. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "Come on, Izzy, you don't belong here. You made that pretty clear when you left. And trust me, this town hasn't forgotten." Her jaw tightened. "People change." Daniel sighed, as if disappointed. "Look, I'll make you the same offer I made Jasper, a damn good one. He gets financial security. You get to walk away without the burden of a sinking ship. It's a win-win." Izzy took a step closer, meeting his gaze head-on. "Or maybe there's another option," Daniel smirked. "And what would that be?" She didn't have an answer. Not yet, but she intended to find one. Later that night, Izzy sat on the front porch of her rental house, staring out at the quiet town. The conversation with Daniel had left a bitter taste in her mouth. She had spent so many years running. From expectations, from responsibility, from anything that felt like permanence. And now, for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted to keep running. Her grandfather's farm wasn't just land. It was history, roots, something real. Something worth fighting for. And she had a feeling Graham Beckett wasn't wrong. Maybe it was time she figured out what that meant. The morning mist still clung to the fields when Izzy pulled up to Whitmore Farm in her rusty pickup. The crisp scent of damp earth and fresh hay filled the air, a scent so deeply woven into her childhood that it made something ache in her chest. She had spent the entire night replaying her conversation with Daniel Holt, his smug confidence still grating on her nerves. He was right about one thing: she had left. And this town hadn't forgotten, but that didn't mean she had to let him win. Steeling herself, Izzy climbed out of the truck and walked toward the barn, where she knew she'd find her grandfather. The structure was old but sturdy, standing against time, like a stubborn old soldier. The faint sounds of tools clanking echoed from inside. Jasper was where he always had been, hands deep in work, stubbornly refusing to acknowledge the passing years. He didn't look up as she approached, but he knew she was there. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon," he muttered, tightening a bolt on the fence post he was repairing. Izzy leaned against a nearby wooden beam. "Didn't think I'd come back at all, but here we are." Jasper glanced at her. "Something on your mind, girl?" She let out a slow breath. "Daniel Holt cornered me in town last night." That got his attention. He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "That so?" "He's confident you'll sell. Says it's only a matter of time." Jasper's jaw tightened. "That man's been sniffing around this land for years. Thinks just because I'm old, I'll roll over and take his damn money." Izzy crossed her arms. "And will you?" Silence stretched between them. Jasper sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Izzy, this farm ain't what it used to be. I've done my best, but my body ain't what it used to be either." Izzy hesitated. "You don't have to do it alone." Jasper's gaze snapped to hers, sharp and assessing. "And what exactly are you saying?" She swallowed, feeling the weight of her words before she even spoke them. "I'm saying maybe it's time I stop running." Jasper's eyes softened, but He didn't speak right away. Instead, he turned, staring out at the vast fields stretching toward the horizon. "This land is more than dirt and crops, Izzy," he said quietly. "It's our family's history. Your father gave his life to keep it going." "I know." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Jasper nodded, as if he had been waiting for her to understand that for a long time. "Then I reckon we better start fixing this place up." Izzy spent the rest of the morning walking the land with Jasper, seeing it through his eyes, the soil that still had life in it, the old machinery that needed more than just a fresh coat of paint, the fences that had to be repaired. The Whitmore legacy wasn't beyond saving, but it wouldn't be easy, and she knew exactly where to start. By the time Izzy pulled up at Graham Beckett's garage, the afternoon sun was high in the sky. She didn't know why she had come here first. Maybe because Graham was the only person who hadn't judged her for leaving. Or maybe because, deep down, she knew he would give her an honest answer. Graham was working on a classic Chevy, his shirt damp with sweat, grease streaked across his forearms. He barely glanced up as she walked in. "Your truck give out on you." "Yet?" Izzy smirked. "Still holding on, but I figured I'd push my luck and come annoy you anyway." He snorted, finally looking up. Mission accomplished. She hesitated, suddenly unsure of how to bring this up. But then Maeve's voice rang out from inside the shop. "Miss Izzy!" The little girl came skipping out from behind the counter, her face lighting up. "Are you here for a sandwich? You should be. Daddy makes the best ones." Izzy grinned. "You know I still haven't tried one. That's a crime, isn't it?" Maeve nodded solemnly. "A serious one." Graham shook his head. "Maeve, go wash up before you start taking orders." The little girl huffed but obeyed, disappearing back inside. When she was gone, Izzy turned to Graham, exhaling. "I need your help," she said finally. Graham wiped his hands on a rag. "With what?" "Fixing up the farm." His brows lifted slightly. "You're staying?" "I think so." The words tasted unfamiliar but not wrong. Graham studied her, as if weighing whether or not to believe her. "And what exactly do you need from me?" "Well," she said, tilting her head, "I heard you're pretty handy with tools." A ghost of a smirk crossed his lips. "You looking for a mechanic or a farmhand?" "Maybe both." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Izzy, I've got a garage to run. I can't just drop everything and—" "I'm not asking you to drop anything," she interrupted. "I just need some guidance, a place to start. You've lived here your whole life. You know this land, these people. I don't." For a long moment he didn't speak. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. "All right, I'll help, but on one condition." She raised a brow. "Which is, you finally try one of my damn sandwiches." Izzy burst out laughing. "Deal!" And just like that, the first real piece of her new life fell into place. That evening, Izzy returned to Whitmore Farm, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She wasn't naive. She knew this wouldn't be easy. Holt wouldn't back off just because she had decided to stay. And she had a lot to prove. Not just to Jasper, but to the town that had watched her leave. But for the first time in a long time, she wanted to fight for something. As she stepped onto the front porch, Jasper was waiting, a knowing look in his eyes. "You look like someone who made up their mind about something," Izzy smiled. "I think I have," Jasper nodded. "Then we got work to do." And with that, the real battle for Whitmore Farm began. The first rays of morning sunlight spilled over Whitmore Farm, casting a golden glow on the vast fields stretching into the horizon. The land, once thriving and full of life, now stood in quiet defiance against time. Fences had weakened, weeds had claimed their territory, and the once proud barn bore the scars of neglect. But today, that was going to change. Izzy stood on the farmhouse porch, sipping coffee from an old ceramic mug she had found in the kitchen. The warmth of the drink didn't do much to settle the nerves twisting in her stomach. This was real now. No more running, no more excuses. She had told Jasper she was staying. Now she had to prove it. The rumble of an approaching truck broke the silence. She looked up to see Graham Beckett's F-150 kicking up dust as it rolled down the gravel driveway. Maeve was in the passenger seat, her excitement visible even from a distance. As soon as the truck stopped, Maeve flung the door open and jumped, out, arms spread wide. "Miss Izzy, Daddy says we're fixing things today." Izzy chuckled as she set her mug down. "That's the plan, kiddo." Graham stepped out next, adjusting his worn baseball cap. "I hope you know what you're getting yourself into," he said, glancing around. Izzy smirked. "I don't, but that's never stopped me before." Jasper emerged from the barn then, nodding at Graham. "Well, I'll be damned. Didn't think I'd see you out here, Beckett." Graham shrugged. "Figured I'd lend a hand before this place collapses." "On itself," Jasper snorted. "You might be too late for that." Izzy clapped her hands together. "All right, gentlemen, less talking, more working. Where do we start?" Graham nodded toward the fence line. "We need to repair the perimeter first. If you want this farm to function again, you're gonna need livestock, and you can't have that with broken fences." Izzy turned to Jasper. "And the barn?" The old man sighed. "That barn's older than me, but it's still got bones worth saving. Needs some serious work, though." Izzy exhaled. "All right, then. Let's get to it." The next few hours were a test of endurance, patience, and sheer willpower. Izzy had never built a fence in her life, but Graham was a patient teacher, showing her how to properly set posts and secure wire. Jasper, despite his grumbling, worked alongside them, his movements slower than they once were, but still full of purpose. Maeve took her role as official supervisor very seriously, running back and forth with a clipboard she had stolen from the farmhouse, occasionally shouting things like, "Dad, you're slacking," and "Miss Izzy, you need more enthusiasm." At one point, as Izzy wiped sweat from her brow, she turned to Graham. "I have a whole new level of respect for farmers." Graham smirked. "That's because you've been a city girl too long." She rolled her eyes. "I was never really a city girl, She hesitated, then sighed. "I just didn't think I belonged here." Graham leaned against a newly repaired fence post. "And now?" Izzy glanced around, at the land, at Jasper, at Maeve skipping across the field. "Now, I think I might have been wrong." Graham didn't say anything, but the small nod he gave her said enough. They worked until the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jasper called it a day first, muttering something about old bones needing whiskey. Maeve followed him, chattering away, leaving Izzy and Graham alone by the fence line. Izzy stretched, wincing at the soreness settling into her muscles. "I'm going to feel this tomorrow," Graham chuckled. "You'll get used to it. Hard work grows on you." "Not sure my body agrees," she muttered. Graham leaned against the truck, watching the last rays of sunlight dance over the fields. "So what's your next move?" Izzy sighed. "There's still so much to do. The barn needs major repairs, we need equipment, and we haven't even started thinking about crops or livestock." She shook her head. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this, Graham." "You don't have to do it all at once," he said simply. "You take it one step at a time, just like today." Izzy looked at him, really looked at him. Graham Beckett was solid, in a way that steadied people, like an anchor in the middle of a storm. And for some reason that mattered. Before she could respond, a sleek black SUV pulled into the driveway, its presence immediately out of place among the dust and grit of the farm. Izzy stiffened. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me." The door opened, and out stepped Daniel Holt, impeccably dressed, the smirk already on his face like he owned the place. "Well, well," he drawled, looking around. "It's almost charming when you squint." Graham pushed off the truck, his expression hardening. "You lost?" Daniel barely spared him a glance before focusing on Izzy. "Just thought I'd stop by, check. In on my future investment." Izzy crossed her arms. "Not for sale, Holt," Daniel chuckled. "That's not what your grandfather said last time we spoke." Her jaw tightened. "He hasn't signed anything. Yet." Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. Come on, Izzy. Be smart about this. You really think you can bring this place back to life? You don't have the resources, the manpower, or the experience. He tilted his head. You think these people are going to suddenly accept you back with open arms? You walked away from this life. Maybe it's time you let it go. Izzy's hands curled into fists, but before she could respond, Graham stepped between them, his presence a wall of quiet strength. You done here? Graham's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that even Daniel seemed to register. For a moment, Holt hesitated, but then he smirked. For now, but don't get too comfortable, Izzy. This fight isn't over. He turned and walked back to his car, the SUV kicking up dust as it sped away. Izzy let out a slow breath, her fists still, clenched. You okay? Graham asked. She exhaled. Yeah, just pissed off. He smirked. That's a good thing. Means you're ready to fight. Izzy met his gaze, something resolute settling in her chest. Damn right I am. And for the first time she knew with certainty she wasn't leaving this place without a fight. The next morning, Izzy woke to the rhythmic creaking of the farmhouse's old wooden floorboards as Jasper moved about. The familiar sounds, once a distant memory, had become part of her world again. She stretched, feeling the soreness from the previous day's work settle deep into her muscles. Every part of her ached, but it was a satisfying ache, the kind that came from building something, not running from it. As she pulled on her boots, a firm knock sounded at the front door. She expected it to be Graham coming by early to get a head start on the barn repairs. But when she opened the door, her stomach twisted. Standing on the porch, looking every bit the polished businessman, was Daniel Holt. His smile was as smooth as ever, but his eyes carried an edge. Morning, Izzy. Thought I'd stop by before heading back to Austin. Izzy folded her arms. Let me guess. You're here to make another sales pitch? Daniel let out a soft chuckle. More like a reality check. He glanced past her toward the fields. Nice to see you're making an effort, but let's be honest. You're in over your head. Izzy clenched her jaw. Funny. Last I checked, it's my head to be in over. Daniel sighed, shaking his head. You don't have to do this, Izzy. You can walk away, let this place go, and no one would blame you. He leaned against the porch railing. Jasper's barely holding on. The farm is falling apart, and you've been gone for over a decade. You think this town is suddenly going to welcome you back just because you decide you want to play farmer? Anger simmered beneath her skin. She knew what he was doing, chipping away at her doubts, planting seeds of failure. She wouldn't let him. I'm not playing anything, Holt, she said, stepping closer, voice steady. This farm isn't for sale. Daniel exhaled as if disappointed. All right then. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and held it out. But I hope you're prepared for the consequences. Izzy hesitated before taking it, her stomach twisting as she unfolded the document. It was a formal petition for the foreclosure of Whitmore Farm, proof that Holt was willing to play dirty. She looked up, fire in her eyes. You're trying to force us out? Daniel shrugged. Not force, just giving your grandfather a way out. Before this place crumbles beneath him, he's already struggling to keep up with payments. It's only a matter of time before the bank steps in. Izzy's grip tightened on the paper. You really think I'm going to let you take this land? Daniel smirked. I think you don't have a choice. A sharp voice cut through the tension. That's so. Izzy turned to see Graham Beckett standing at the bottom of the porch steps, arms crossed over his broad chest. His expression was unreadable, but the firm set of his jaw told Izzy everything. He wasn't going anywhere. Daniel sighed, clearly, annoyed. This doesn't concern you, Beckett, Graham smirked. It does when you start threatening my friends. Izzy's heart did an odd little twist at the word friends, but she shoved it aside. Now wasn't the time. Daniel looked between them, his confident smirk returning. All right, you two want to play hero. Be my guest. But I'd start figuring out how you're going to save this place, because that clock—" He tapped his watch. "It's ticking." With that, he walked back to his car and drove off, leaving behind nothing but dust and tension. Izzy exhaled slowly, then turned to Graham, still gripping the foreclosure notice in her hand. "I need a plan," she muttered. Graham nodded. "Then let's make one." Back in the kitchen, Jasper sat at the worn wooden table, reading over the foreclosure notice with a scowl. "Damn vulture," he muttered. "He's been waiting for this." Izzy sank into the chair across from him. "How bad is it?" Jasper sighed. "Bad, but not impossible. The bank gave us a deadline. We need to make a substantial payment within the next few months to keep the farm from being seized." Izzy ran a hand through her hair. "That gives us, 90 days?" Jasper nodded. "Give or take." Graham leaned against the counter. "So what's the farm's biggest asset?" Jasper smirked. "The land, boy, always has been." Graham gave a dry chuckle. "Yeah, well, land doesn't pay bank loans on its own." Izzy tapped her fingers against the table, mind racing. "We need income, fast. Something sustainable, something the bank can see as a turnaround effort." Jasper hesitated before finally saying, "We used to run a farmer's market every summer. People came from all over for our produce, dairy and livestock sales." Izzy's eyes lit up. "Then we do it again." Graham raised a brow. "Izzy, that's not something you throw together overnight." "I know," she admitted, "but it's our best shot. We get the town involved, bring people in, show them this place isn't dead yet." Jasper sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's a hell of a long shot." Izzy looked at him, determination burning in her chest. "So is giving up." The room fell into silence. Then slowly, Jasper nodded. "All right, let's raise some hell." Graham smirked. "You do realize this means a hell of a lot more work, right?" Izzy grinned. "What? Are you backing out now?" He snorted. "Not a chance." Izzy leaned back for the first time, feeling like she belonged here again. This farm wasn't just Jasper's legacy. It was hers too, and she wasn't going to let Holt take it without a fight. The next morning, Izzy stood on the porch of Whitmore Farm, staring out at the sprawling fields bathed in golden light. The land was quiet, but it was far from lifeless. The whispers of the past were everywhere, in the swaying wheat, in the creaking barn doors, in the memory of her father's laughter as he worked long hours to keep this place running. And now it was her turn. She exhaled, determination settling deep in her bones. If they were going to save the farm, they needed help, and that meant convincing the town to stand with them. She grabbed her keys, ready to put her plan into motion. The breakfast crowd at Carly's diner was already in full swing when Izzy walked through the door. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee filled the air, and the low hum of small-town chatter buzzed from every corner. Carly Munro was behind the counter, pouring coffee into mugs like a seasoned bartender. She looked up as Izzy approached, raising a knowing eyebrow. "Well, if it isn't the Whitmore girl," Carly drawled. "Heard you were stirring things up at the farm." Izzy smirked. "You could say that." She glanced around the diner. "I need to talk to people. Think I could borrow everyone's attention for a minute?" Carly's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Well, honey, if you can talk over Jimmy Carter's opinions on the weather, be my guest." Izzy turned to see Jimmy Carter, no relation to the former president, holding court at the back table, explaining to a group of farmers how the recent rain was either the best or worst thing that could have happened, depending on the phase of the moon. Carly smirked, then tapped a spoon against a coffee cup, the sharp clink cutting through the noise. "All right, folks, listen up. The prodigal Whitmore has something to say." Izzy fought the urge to groan. Leave it to Carly to make this feel like a town hall meeting, but there was no turning back now. She cleared her throat. "As most of you know, my grandfather's farm is in trouble. We're facing foreclosure, and if we don't act fast, Whitmore, Farm is going to end up in the hands of a developer who'll turn it into another luxury retreat for out-of-towners. A murmur spread through the room. That farm's been here longer than any of us, Old Man Briggs muttered from his corner booth. Izzy nodded. Exactly. And I don't intend to let it disappear, which is why we're bringing back the Whitmore farmers. Market! The murmuring grew louder. Jimmy Carter leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Farmers' market's been dead for years, sweetheart. What makes you think you can revive it? Izzy met his gaze, steady and unwavering. Because we have no other choice. She let that sink in before continuing. If we can get enough vendors, we can bring in real revenue, show the bank that the farm is still profitable. That means local produce, dairy, livestock sales, handmade goods, whatever we can get. But we need everyone's help. We need people to sell, people to buy, and people to spread the word. A beat of silence. Then, from the back of the room, Graham's voice rang out. She's right. All eyes turned to him as he pushed away from the counter, arms crossed. You all complain about how this town is changing, how the old ways are dying. Well, this is your chance to do something about it. We help. Izzy, we help ourselves. We keep this town's history alive. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Then Carly clapped her hands together. All right, hell, I'm in. I'll set up a baked goods stand. Lord knows people still crave my peach cobbler. One by one, others followed. The Hendersons offered fresh eggs. Joe Carter volunteered his honey. Even Old Man Briggs, the town's resident cynic, grumbled something about bringing his prized tomatoes. Izzy felt a knot in her chest loosen. They weren't just fighting for the farm. They were fighting for their way of life, and they were in this together. By the time Izzy and Graham left the diner, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. But it wasn't gone. We pulled them in, she said as they walked toward the truck. But now we actually have to pull this off, Graham smirked. Welcome to leadership, she groaned. I was hoping it'd come with a guidebook. You'll figure it out. She sighed, looking back at the town, behind them. I just hope we're not too late. Graham's expression turned serious. Holt's not going to back off. You know that, right? Izzy's jaw tightened. I know, but he doesn't know me. She looked up at Graham. I don't back down. Something flickered in his gaze. Respect, maybe something more, but he only nodded. Good. Then, with the weight of the fight ahead settling over them, they got in the truck and drove back to Whitmore Farm. The battle was just beginning. The following weeks became a whirlwind of work. Izzy barely had time to breathe between organizing vendors, repairing the barn, setting up stalls, and making sure every inch of Whitmore Farm was ready for the farmers' market. The entire town had rallied behind her, proving that despite the years she had been gone, Whitmore Farm still mattered. Even Carly Monroe had somehow convinced the local newspaper to run a piece about the market, drawing attention from surrounding towns. But despite the momentum, Izzy knew the real battle was still ahead, because Daniel Holt wasn't going to let this farm go without a fight. The morning before the grand reopening of the Whitmore Farmers Market, Izzy and Graham were walking the fence line, checking the last of the repairs, when a loud crash echoed from the barn. Izzy's heart lurched. She sprinted toward the sound, Graham right on her heels, and skidded to a stop just inside the barn. Doors, the support beams, the ones they had spent days reinforcing, had collapsed, leaving a tangled mess of wood and shattered crates. Jasper stood nearby, gripping his cane so tightly his knuckles were white. This wasn't an accident, he muttered. Izzy's stomach twisted. Holt, Graham crouched beside the wreckage, inspecting the damage. Looks like someone weakened the bolts. This was deliberate. Izzy clenched her fists. He's trying to scare us. Jasper let out a rough chuckle, shaking his head. Damn fool doesn't know us very well, does he? Despite the anger simmering in her veins, Izzy felt a flicker of something else. Pride. Her grandfather was still a fighter. Graham rose to his feet, dusting off his hands. We can fix this. It's gonna take all night, but we can do it. Izzy met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "We don't have a choice," she said, and just like that they got to work. The next 12 hours became a blur of sweat, sawdust, and sheer determination. Graham worked relentlessly, leading the repairs with a quiet, steady confidence that kept everyone focused. Jasper, despite his protests, directed them with the sharp efficiency of a man who had built this barn with his own hands decades ago. Even Maeve stayed up late, handing out water and making sure no one collapsed from exhaustion. By sunrise, the barn stood strong once more. Izzy stepped back, exhaustion weighing heavy in her bones, but a fierce sense of victory filling her chest. Holt had tried to break them. He had failed, and now it was time to show him exactly what Whitmore Farm was made of. By midday, people were flooding in, laughter and conversation filling the air as vendors set up their stalls. The scent of fresh bread and roasted peanuts mingled with the crisp autumn breeze. Izzy stood at the center of it all, heart pounding, watching as something she had once thought lost came back to life. Graham appeared at her side, arms crossed as he surveyed the crowd. "Not bad, Whitmore," she smirked. "Not bad at all." Maeve came running toward them, her excitement infectious. "Miss Izzy, people love it. Carly already sold out of peach cobbler." Izzy grinned, crouching to Maeve's level. "That's because she makes the best peach cobbler in town." Maeve nodded seriously. "Daddy says you have to try his sandwiches now. It's the law," Graham groaned. "Maeve," but Izzy just laughed. "Well, we wouldn't want to break the law, would we?" Graham muttered something about conspiracies, but there was no hiding the way his eyes softened as he looked at her. For a moment, everything felt right. And then Daniel Holt arrived. Holt strode through the market like he owned it, his sharp suit out of place among the flannel-clad farmers and handmade goods. People whispered as he passed, some throwing him wary glances, others outright glaring. The town might have once entertained his business deals, but today he was the outsider. Izzy squared her shoulders as he approached, ready for whatever ploy he had planned. Holt stopped just a few feet away, smirk firmly in place. "Impressive turnout. Almost makes me believe you have a chance." She refused to flinch. "We do." He tilted his head, eyes glinting. "We'll see about that. You might have put on a nice little show, but the bank still needs hard proof that this farm is worth saving. Sentiment doesn't pay off debts." Izzy lifted her chin. "Maybe not, but community does." Holt's smirk faltered slightly, just for a second, and then Jasper stepped beside her, his voice firm and unwavering. "You can pack up your fancy suits and go, boy," he said, his tone carrying the weight of decades spent on this land. "Whitmore, farm isn't for sale," Holt chuckled, shaking his head. "That so?" A voice rang out from the crowd. "That's so." Izzy turned to see Graham standing beside her, arms crossed, eyes steady, backing her up. Always. Then another voice. "We ain't letting you take this land, Holt." And another. "You can go back to Austin." Now, one by one, the town stood behind her. Izzy met Holt's gaze, holding it. "It's over." Holt exhaled sharply, eyes scanning the crowd before landing back on her. For the first time, his confidence wavered. "Fine," he muttered. "Have it your way." Then, with nothing left to say, he turned and walked away. And just like that, Whitmore Farm was safe. As the sun began to set over the farm, the market wound down, but the energy in the air remained electric. Izzy stood at the edge of the fields, watching as families packed up, as laughter drifted into the cool evening air. Graham walked up beside her, his presence as steady as ever. "You did it," he said. "We did it," she corrected. He nodded, gaze softening. "So, what now?" Izzy took a deep breath, looking out at the land that had once been her past. Now it was her future. "Now," she said, "we build something even better." And with Graham beside her, she knew they would. The wind carried the scent of freshly tilled earth as Izzy stood on the front porch of Whitmore Farm, watching the first light of dawn stretch across the fields. The golden wheat swayed like waves under a soft morning breeze, whispering secrets of the past. She had never truly listened before, not as a child, when she resented this land for tying her family down. Not as a teenager, when she had run away, thinking the world beyond these fields held something better. But now, standing here, she finally understood what Jasper had always known. This land wasn't just a place. It was a story, a legacy, a heartbeat, and today she would fight for it one last time. The farmers' market had been a success beyond what anyone imagined. Word had spread far beyond their small town, and people came from miles away. Vendors sold out of goods. Families roamed the fields, laughing, buying, belonging. Even the bank representatives had been impressed. They had agreed to extend Whitmore Farm's loan, giving them the breathing room they needed. For the first time in years, the farm had a real future. But it wasn't just about saving the farm anymore. It was about coming home. That evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of violet, Izzy found Jasper on the front porch, sitting in his rocking chair, watching the fields the way he always did. A half-full glass of whiskey rested on the armrest. The same bottle he had pulled out the night she returned. She stepped onto the porch and leaned against the railing. "You tired yet, old man?" she teased. Jasper let out a chuckle, his voice quieter than usual. "I've been tired for years, girl, but this is the good kind of tired." Izzy sat beside him, silent, stretching comfortably between them. Jasper cleared his throat. "I never thought you'd come back, you know," she swallowed, looking down at her hands. "I didn't either." He nodded as if he understood more than she was saying. "You did good today," he said after a while. "Your daddy would have been proud." Something in her chest tightened. "I spent so long thinking I didn't belong here," she admitted. "That I wasn't meant for this place, but now I don't know how I ever walked away." Jasper smiled, his gaze still on the horizon. "That's the thing about home, kid. It don't need you to stay forever. Just needs you to find your way back." A lump formed in her throat. She had found her way back, and she wasn't leaving this time. Later that night, after most of the town had gone home, a few stragglers stayed behind. Carly, Jimmy Carter, the Hendersons, all gathered around the barn, talking and reminiscing about old times. Someone had pulled out an old record player, and soft country music drifted through the air. Izzy leaned against the barn door, exhaustion settling into her bones in the best way possible. She felt whole. Graham walked up beside her, hands in his pockets. "Hell of a night," she nodded, glancing at him. "You know, I think you might have enjoyed this more than you're willing to admit." Graham smirked. "I enjoy watching you work yourself into exhaustion. It's entertaining." Izzy rolled her eyes. "You're impossible." Then, before she could think too much about it, she held out a hand. "Dance with me," she said. Graham raised an eyebrow. "Is that an order?" she grinned. "It's an invitation." He hesitated for only a second before taking her hand, leading her onto the makeshift dance floor beneath the open sky. The music was slow, a soft melody that wrapped around them like the warmth of a summer night. For the first time in a long time, Izzy wasn't thinking about tomorrow or the next battle ahead. She was just here. Now, with him. Graham's hand rested lightly on her waist, the other still holding hers, calloused fingers against her palm. They moved in slow circles, the night air cool against her skin. "Didn't think you were the dancing type," she murmured. Graham smirked. "I'm not, but I figured you'd be too stubborn to take no for an answer." Izzy laughed softly, her forehead almost resting against his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. After a moment, Graham tilted his head. "For what?" "For sticking around," she said. "For helping me believe I could do this." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and there was something quiet but certain in his gaze. "You never needed me, To believe it, he said. You just needed to see it for yourself. And just like that, she knew. She was exactly where she was meant to be. A few days later, Izzy found Jasper in the same rocking chair he always sat in. Only this time his hands were folded in his lap, his breathing soft and steady. A small smile rested on his lips. But he wasn't waking up. The funeral was quiet, simple, just as Jasper would have wanted. The town gathered, not just for grief, but to celebrate a man who had kept this land alive for decades. Afterward, Izzy sat alone on the porch, staring out at the land Jasper had fought so hard for. A warm hand settled on her shoulder. Graham. He would have been proud, he said softly. Izzy swallowed past the lump in her throat. He was my last piece of the past. Graham shook his head. No. He was proof that the past doesn't have to be left behind. It can be carried forward. Looked at him then, and for the first time, she wasn't just looking at Graham Beckett. She was seeing a future, not just for herself, not just for the farm, for them. She reached down, her fingers brushing against the soil beneath the porch. Whitmore Farm wasn't just land, it was home, and it always would be. As the wind carried the scent of wheat and earth through the night, Izzy whispered, "We're still here, Grandpa, and we always will be." And that, my friends, is the story of Whitmore Farm, the journey of a woman who thought she had lost everything, a man who had long stopped believing in second chances, and the land that brought them together. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Do you believe in the power of fate, or do you think we carve our own paths? Let's talk about it in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free, and it helps us bring you more heartwarming, inspiring stories that touch the soul. And if you really loved it, give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs a little bit of hope today. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more unforgettable stories with you. Until next time, stay inspired, stay hopeful, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful things in life come when you least expect them. See you in the next story.